everyone, and welcome to Booming Encore's Learning Bites. My name is Susan Williams, and I'm the founder of Booming Encore. The COVID-19 pandemic continues to challenge how we live and work, and one of these ways is through our increase in the number of people now actually working from home. A Gartner HR survey found that 88% of organizations have encouraged or required their employees to work at home due to the coronavirus. But this change in how we work isn't coming without its challenges. To help us better understand this new working environment and how we can best respond, we're creating a Learning Bite series called COVID-19, the Virtual Workplace. Today, I'm delighted to be joined again by Dr. Sean Hayes. Dr. Hayes is a clinical psychologist and the co-founder of Coheasio. And today we're going to be discussing some of the challenges that working at home may have for not only the employee, but also their team and their managers. So welcome, Dr. Hayes. Great to have you.
Thank you, and it's good to be back. Thank you for asking me.
So Dr. Hayes, many people are now working from home for the first time in their careers, or at least for what we call much more of an extended period of time. What are some of the challenges that they may be actually experiencing?
Yeah, I think the challenges have been more than most organizations might have expected because, as you stated, many organizations may have already permitted some types of remote work. But again, to move to entirely full operational business functions completely remote is a very abrupt transformation. Now, when you consider most transformations in any businesses that address policies, procedures, people changes, they take time. They're mapped out very carefully over time, usually mapped with a change management process. This is what was called an abrupt business transformation, literally abrupt. So I think there's two key aspects that came into play and have emerged. One is sort of somewhat obvious, but I think even some organizations were surprised, was the immediate adoption learning curve. And literally this was in terms of the equipment, technology, space needed. Think about things like, did everybody have the right software? High-speed internet access at home, laptops, copiers. Was there a company private network? For some cases, if financial or there's information that has to be stored. Was there virtual cloud space set up? Teleconference video programs. Those things had to be put into place quickly and rapidly. For the most part, I think those things are doable because it's about equipment and technology, and most people have found a way to acclimatize to that somehow. Although I did think about what you said about those people in a small apartment. And suddenly you have 2 or 3 people in a 600 square foot space. So there's still issues around that have to be adjusted. I think probably the larger issue that's more complex and one that we haven't quite got a grasp on and won't yet is the whole behavioral change or change readiness curve. There's a saying in psychology, you probably heard this, Sue, that nobody likes change but a wet baby. And that's particularly true when circumstances are forced. And this was a forced change for everybody. So I think this will bring up a number of responses, even amongst those of us who might not have expected it. It could trigger feelings of your own confidence about your work and over-conscientious. So some people might be sort of doing too much or too little. It could trigger a sense of security. Fears for your future, I think, are applying for everybody. So that could play into your work. I found interesting, it could even trigger something as simple, seemingly as simple as boundaries. For some of us, we keep a very distinct line between our work lives and our home lives. And we want it that way. That's comfortable. Leaders, for example, sometimes choose. They don't like to mix their personal life with their work life. All of a sudden, their home is there. The sound of the dog is there. And to some extent, it's a psychological invasion of our own privacy. And I think that's something that's triggered some concerns. Now, others don't mind at all. They think it's funny. But others, that's going to be quite challenging.
Yeah, and that's where we've seen those videos pop up, with the kids running in the background and doing things with your computer, not realizing that the camera is on and all of that sort of thing. But going along that vein, what about the actual work itself and the individual and how they actually now structure their day and the limits that they possibly need to put on that? Is that going to be a potential problem or an impact?
I think it can be. I think for some people, this sort of the obvious and what I call the motherhood and apple pie rules are there. We've seen them. They're all out there. Structure your day, structure your workspace. That's pretty obvious. However, even within that, there's still a sense of where do I stop? Where do I get off? I need to work much harder because I've got to prove my value. What if I'm a newly appointed manager and I'm concerned about the perception not only of my team, but of my senior management because they can't see me anymore. They don't know that I'm in the office now from 8 till 6 every day. I have to prove it. So there's an element of overconscientiousness that's emerging. There's an element of losing a sense of boundaries between what is appropriate for work and what's not. That could also even go up to the level of leadership. I think there's a risk that some leaders can, not consciously, but may fall into micromanagement, overstepping their boundaries, suddenly getting into everything because they have their own anxieties. There could be a fear for their sense of autonomy. It's interesting, Sue, you mentioned these funny things we're seeing, and some of them are amusing online. There was one video going around of a woman as a leader, a manager, who was unable to move the scrim of the potato. And she took it very well. But I also thought, imagine for her, it could feel a sense of, my sense of leadership is now potentially going to be questioned, or am I going to be seen as incompetent? I'm not saying that's how she reacted, but it could have been.
Yeah, exactly, because it's introducing a whole new skill set. And speaking of which, like, for instance, teams and how do they operate within this sort of working environment? What are some of the impacts that people may be experiencing as a result of this?
Well, now you've hit my key interest area. There's a lot of evidence that's emerged on what's called the professional maturity of teams. And most of that can be very insidious. So fundamentally, like most of us, if the team is already functioning in a cohesive, interdependent, supportive, comfortable with roles and responsibilities, really know who to go to, and very mature in terms of their own weaknesses and strengths. So I'm able to say to you, Sue, as my team member, Sue, I'm not strong in this area and I'm okay with that. We'll need some time to work with it. Then it's likely that team will adjust well. However, the evidence has shown over the years that many, many teams don't necessarily function like that 24/7. Now you throw into the component of they don't get to see each other. There's no sense of the nonverbal feedback. There's no clarity of who's doing what. So any underlying issues that may have already been in place, cliques, any isolation of particular employees, sometimes, unfortunately, even the insidious isms could quite possibly serve up to the surface, could even get worse. There could be behind the scene conversations now that people can do because they're not at the office. Mm-hmm. So it becomes far more complex to identify the risks, for management to be able to address those risks, because if those were already there, they could become quite prevalent.
And just on that vein then, from a manager's perspective, I'm sure that this is probably a major shift in how they typically manage for those that maybe not used to having a virtual workforce.
Yeah, I think it also demands new competencies and skills, not just of the individual employees, literally some of the skills on what they can do, but how do they think? What are their sense of responsibilities? Where are their boundaries? But it also requires a new set of competencies and skills and approach by management. I think there is a need to be a little bit more on top of things, but I'm saying that more from the perspective of checking in, not checking out. Validating, are you there? Do you need support? But I think the other challenge that's going to emerge for management is the routes that they might have traditionally used. For example, they call their HR person. HR isn't now down the hallway. What about compensation models? If compensation models have been based on a certain type of deliverables, then those deliverables aren't possible anymore. So there's much larger organizational structural things that leadership is having to very quickly address and identify, and may not have all the answers. Right. Which brings up another issue. That leader might have to say, I don't know what to do. And that in and of itself can be challenging.
Yeah, and I think that's where the trust factor kicks in as well, right?
Absolutely. I think if trust fundamentally was there, this probably will be a relatively smooth transition. It's not going to be perfect. Everybody's going to make mistakes. But if there were any elements, as there are in many companies, and that's not a that's not a judgment. I think it's just a reality. We don't always trust, or these situations where organizations haven't been built on a system of trust, despite of what many missions may say. It's going to raise those issues to a very high level. And there are concerns for not only the effectiveness of the output and deliverables, but I would argue perhaps more even for the process to get there could become quite difficult.
Well, it's certainly an interesting and challenging time, that's for sure. I think there's probably some good things that are going to come out of this for the workplace, but at the same time, definitely some things that are going to have to be adjusted as we move forward. So I really want to thank you for your time, Dr. Hayes. I really appreciate it.
And I look forward to discussing some of those possible solutions.
And so as Dr. Hayes said, please join us
question.
for our next segment, where we'll actually break down how people can actually prepare and thrive in this new sort of work environment. So thank you so much for your time, and to everybody out there, hope you found this information valuable, and stay safe, everyone. We'll see you soon.
Good night.